Welcome to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. It's the show geared toward keeping you up to speed with the latest auto news, event coverage, and expert industry insight. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Avery and John Kraman.
Hey, and welcome to another On the Move. My name is Matt Avery. I'm executive producer of The Transmission, and joining me is co-host John Kraman, lead TV commentator for Mecum Auctions on NBCSN. John, when you're going about building a project vehicle and you still want to keep it streetable, but you really want the most performance from your engine, that can be a pretty tricky situation to figure out how to go about doing that. And that's what today's show is all about. Starting with in segment 2, we're talking with Dwayne McGunegill, a McGunegill Engine Performance, a Midwest shop with decades of experience putting together high-performance powertrains for both race and street applications. And then in segment 3, we're talking with friend of the show and floor reporter for Mecum Auctions, Stephen Cox, and hearing about his journey and how he went about creating his ultimate Mustang, a vehicle with very close ties to him and his family.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. A topic, Matt, that a lot of us have some interest in. Speaking of interest, let's take a quick peek at what's happening with Mecum Glendale coming up just around the corner. Have added a couple of additional collections to the mix. I've noticed on the Mecum website, and so we now have 8 big collections coming to that great auction, of course, being led by the fantastic Steve Todd Hunter collection of 20 vehicles, including 7 high-end Ferraris. That's our main attraction, but lots going on there as well. We'll have great vehicles from $5,000 to that Steve Todd Hunter collection as well. Some of the pertinent data on that auction, of course, it's coming up 3 days, Glendale, Arizona, which is the greater Phoenix area at the State Farm Stadium, home of the Cardinals, and that's March 18th through the 20th. Gates will open every day at 8 a.m. It is open for spectators, but tickets must be purchased online, as there will be no tickets sold on site to reduce person-to-person contact. Before the auction, tickets only $20 online. And if you wait for the auction to start and you go online to buy the tickets, they will cost you $30. Consignments still being taken. Bidder registration still open, $200 for bidder registration, by the way. And that includes you and a guest for all 3 days. I've mentioned spectators are allowed, also kids 12 and under for free. And I do want to say that virus safety protocol still in place. Daily temperature checks. You'll get a wristband that's good for the day. We are requiring masks 100% of the time, hand sanitizer everywhere, and lots of social distancing protocol. As soon as we get done with that, we are going to set our sights on the Houston auction, which is our next collector car auction. That's April 8th through the 10th. Once again, getting a lot of buzz and excitement about that auction. And so if you're thinking about consigning to that, do not hesitate.
John, it's the start of a new month, and that means there's a new Mecum Monthly magazine available. As many listeners know, you write a column in it, and that has me wondering, what were you writing about this time?
Yep, my monthly column at the Redline, Matt, is called, this might be a surprise to you, On the Move. I take a little bit of a light dive back to the history and the genesis of our podcast, dating back to last year. So invite everybody to take a look at that. Mecum Monthly, of course, always filled with plenty of great content, including columns from both you and me and others. So I'm anxious to hear what you have contributed to for the Mecum Monthly.
Well, first up was a big feature examining one of my favorite muscle cars, and that is the 1965 Chevelle Malibu Super Sport with option Z16, meaning that it would be equipped with a 396 V8 engine. And it's such a special car and one that really helped to set the tone for Chevrolet's performance program during those years. It had such a targeted marketing strategy and rollout, and I so examined that and how it was advertised both towards customers and also dealerships who were encouraged to get behind kind of this new performance image. And so I also took a look at how to identify Z16, because there are some visual cues both on the outside and the inside that set it apart. And it's a great time to be thinking Z16, as we do have an upcoming example crossing the block at Mecum's Glendale auction, lot number S126. Also in this month's magazine, in my Free Revs column, I was taking a close look at 25 very special special Land Rovers. Now, they're being built by the brand's classic division, so they are based on 2012 to 2016 Defenders, but they are getting fully overhauled in the spirit of the Land Rover trucks that competed in the 80s and 90s in the Camel Trophy, which were these kind of grueling off-road competitions held all around the world. So this new run are, like I said, done up in that spirit. They'll be painted yellow like those trucks, and they'll have all kinds of off-road gear. And I think my favorite part is that when you purchase one, you get entry into a special off-road competition held in England that will really help to sharpen your driving skills. So pretty cool, neat trucks with loads of heritage. Now, John, speaking of heritage, Norm Kraus, better known as Mr. Norm, has passed away at the age of 87. He and his brother left such a mark on the muscle car community as they co-own Grand Spalding Dodge, a dealership in Chicago that was really just such a buzzing activity for Mopar performance during the 1960s.
Oh, man, big shocking news, Matt. In fact, you're the one that alerted me to it. Just what, as you say, what a huge loss. Norm Kraus, of course, the brainchild behind the performance-themed Dodge dealership, reaching its peak really in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Grand Spalding Dodge, named for the intersection of the two streets that the dealership was located on. Norm, such a visionary and an innovator and a vocal supporter for Mopar performance in general. And I think one of the biggest things, Matt, other than the fact that by the mid-1970s, he had grown the dealership to the largest Dodge dealership in the entire world. He sold out a couple years later, but guess what? He stayed active in the show vehicle circuit really right up until the past year or two. I remember many times hanging out with Norm Kraus, Mr. Norm, at various car shows, including McCacken several times, and hearing him tell stories about the past. So I think his legacy, Matt, is going to be a blend of not only what he accomplished by putting Dodge and Mopar overall in the performance wars right at the top, but even more so the accessibility over the years after that to his legions of fans. Man, he's really going to be missed.
Something else going on in the world of car news relates to the humble mail truck. The United States Post Service will be getting an all-new truck in 2023, and it is called the Next Generation Delivery Vehicle, or the NGDV. Now, this will replace the Grumman LLV that has been in service since 1987. That's that really iconic truck that's out there delivering mail, but it's gotten a little dated. So this new design has a distinct look featuring a much larger windshield, which gives the drivers better visibility. It'll also have other improvements like AC, 360 around view cameras, collision warning, and even airbags. And Oshkosh is saying that once they get rolling, they will be building upwards of 165,000 of these things.
Yeah, it was big news, Matt. This program has been put into place all the way back in 2015, and the ink is still wet on the contracts, but it definitely is going to happen. And I think one of the most interesting factors or variables on this, although the powertrains have not been teased a little bit, but very, very little detail. But we do know that the at least initially, the bulk of them will be traditional gasoline powered, which kind of goes a little bit against the grain of some of what we're hearing from the current administration of wanting government vehicles to go all electric. And clearly this is not happening with this new project. And keep in mind, approximately 1/3 of all of the government vehicles being operated here in the U.S. are Postal Service vehicles. So be interesting to see how all of that unravels as we head towards seeing our first ones hit the streets in a year or two.
Well, something we'll be seeing sooner than that is a new performance sedan from Lexus in the form of the 2022 IS 500 F Sport Performance. It's got a 5-liter V8 underneath the hood that delivers 472 horsepower and 395 pound-feet of torque. That gets paired to an 8-speed automatic. The brand says 0 to 60 comes in 4.5 seconds. Other features found on this sedan include bigger brakes, a raised hood, dark chrome window trim, 19-inch exclusive wheels, and black badging. Something interesting about this, John, is that Lexus says this is the first in this all-new F Sport Performance lineup, which actually has more performance than the standard F Sport. So it'll be interesting to see what other models are going to be joining it. All we know is that it will be arriving this fall, and no word on pricing just yet.
Well, and another nod to the apparent future of high performance ICE engines. Keep in mind, last seen on a sedan on this platform at 2014. Why they chose now to introduce, or shall we say, reintroduce a Husky V8 powered Lexus for us, those of us that are performance fans. It has been a long wait, but hopefully there's still going to be a lot of buyers out there for high performance sedans, and this is another great one to consider if you're in the market.
Other news relates to Ford's Bronco, and there's so much excitement for this. Now, the Ford Bronco Sport has arrived, and that is out there, but what everyone is waiting for next is when will the big Bronco, the bigger brother to the Bronco Sport, arrive? And it finally seems like, John, that we might have an indicator of when we'll be seeing it in showrooms.
Right, and it looks like, according to Ford, Matt, that the production lines are going to be opening up later this month, late March of 2021. Presumably, probably deliveries at the dealerships a couple, 2-3 weeks after that. So finally, we may have a chance to see them out on the street. And maybe more importantly, for our Mecum listeners, is I am going to predict and guess, nothing confirmed yet, that we will see an early Bronco, new generation Bronco, on a Mecum red carpet almost immediately after the first ones get delivered. We'll keep an eye out for that one.
Wrapping up, there is some car news related to one of the most popular models out there, and that is Chevrolet's C8 Corvette. John, you are such an enthusiast for this model, partly because you just took delivery of your own example not that long ago, so I know you're always keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the world of Corvette, and there's some news for the 2021 model year. Fill us in. What's the latest?
Yeah, there is. First thing, the big news, of course, in the C8 world has been more additional production delays, and not through the fault of the Corvette factory in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Supplier issues from several different component suppliers have caused the slowing down and actually the closure of the Corvette production temporarily, of course. So we're going to be keeping an eye on production numbers. Right now, about 26,000 C8 Corvettes, combining 2020s and 2021s, have been built. They did forecast 40,000 to be built during the 2021 model year. My guess is that number will be slightly reduced due to some of these delays. And maybe the biggest news, Matt, is a price increase. But you know what? It's very, very modest. A $1,000 price increase. Keep in mind, $59,995, the former base price, now up by $1,000. But here's the good news for those early orders that came in as 2020s that have now been pushed to 2021. Those are grandfathered. Everybody that had a confirmed order in the system will be able to get their car, a 2021, at the 2020 price. And I think that $1,000 price increase, very reasonable. But got some new color news. Hopefully we'll be able to share in the next couple of weeks as well that are looming. And maybe the biggest news of all, Z06, the next performance version of the Corvette, C8 Corvette, definitely out on the streets. They're testing these cars. No idea yet on exactly when we're going to see it. Expecting a 5.5 liter V8 with the flat plain crankshaft. I'm guessing well north of 600 horsepower, maybe close to 700 is my personal guess. And I think maybe by the time midsummer arrives, we're going to hear some real data as far as availability and pricing. But no worries, C8 fans. Yeah, it's a long wait if you order one, but we've got, are you ready for this, Matt? 5 C8 Corvettes coming to Mecum Glendale just in a couple of weeks. So you can get your Corvette fix, C8 Corvette fix, handled very nicely at Mecum. Have already sold 13 of the new C8s and now 5 more coming to Glendale. So head on down there and pick one up.
Mecum Auctions is proud to bring you On the Move with Matt Avery and John Kraman. For more on the world of collector cars, head over to Mecum.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
When you're building a street-legal, high-performance vehicle, it can be a little daunting to figure out what type of engine setup is best. And today, in this segment, we're going to focus on that. And joining me now is Dwayne McGunegill of McGunegill Engine Performance, a shop in Muncie, Indiana that has decades of experience. Hey, Dwayne, we really appreciate the time today.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, one of the interesting things about the shop is that it's a family business, and your dad started in 1969. Dwayne, take me back. How did things get rolling?
Well, I mean, my father, when he was young, was always interested in hot rods. So in 69, he started working in his first shop, and I can remember as a little teeny child going there, and they just simply moved all the mufflers and tailpipes side to the side, and boom, there was the first shop. And we slowly built that up, and then in '93, we started our own business, built our first 5,000 square foot shop, and we specialize in oval track racing engines, street performance engines, and high-end restorations. That's the three things that we specialize in. And then Father retired about 8 years ago, and I took over the business, and we're now in a 15,000 square foot facility with 2 engine dynos and a chassis dyno. So we're pretty much can do anything in-house.
Now, you mentioned that there's 3 main focuses, and that's preparing engines for circle track racing, for drag racing, and then street applications. Before we get to that latter category, that street applications, let's talk about competitive needs. When racers come to you, what are they looking for in a powertrain?
Well, circle track is probably our number one thing. That's what it has been over the years, and we specialize in asphalt late models, which is very popular all over the United States and Canada. We build what's called a sealed engine. The cost getting up to 40 and 50,000. So each engine's built exactly the same, approximately $20,000, and that's become a very popular thing. We've built almost 1,000 of those engines over the last 15 years. We do dirt late models. We do. Of course, we do, all types of oval track, but that's our main focus right there on that. Drag racing wise, we do a little bit of everything. There's always the mom and pop guys that we do, and then we do a lot of big bracket racing, big block Chevys up to naturally aspirated 1,450 horsepower.
Now, when a customer comes to you and says, hey, I'm building a vehicle not to compete in, but for the street, but I'm looking for maximum performance, what are some of the questions that you ask them to make sure that they get exactly what they're looking for?
That's always an interesting thing when you're dealing with that type of customer, because their eyes are always bigger than their budget. And sometimes, I make them a little uncomfortable at first, but the first thing I want to know is, what type of budget do we have to work with? I mean, they start talking about what they want, and it might be a $20,000, $30,000 build, where in reality they only have $10,000 to spend. So my first thing is to say, hey, what's our budget? And then I can focus on giving them the best product within their budget. And of course, I've got to know every aspect of the vehicle. What's the function? What are you going to do with it? Is it going to just be driven on Sundays? Just what's going on? And then as far as, you got to know transmissions, weight of the car, rear end, tires, all types of information. I've got a whole list that I go through, because if we're going to build an engine, I want to make sure that it's perfect for that customer. So he has everything that he needs and everything he wants, and he's satisfied.
Now, these customers, are they coming in with a expected number of horsepower that they're expecting out of the engine, or is there some other performance benchmarks that they're looking for?
Well, I see more and more I want horsepower. In the past, it was, look good, sound good, but, today's generation, they want that horsepower. They want to look good, they want to sound good, and they want it to go. So it has changed a little bit in the last 5 to 10 years.
Now, something else that's also changed, I feel like in that time frame, has been the availability of high-performance offerings at a local dealer, where it just seems like it's becoming accessible for people to find cars and trucks, too, that have hundreds of horsepower. Are you finding that that's enough for customers, or is it still driving them to places like your shop to get even more?
Oh, yes, it really is. I mean, if you look online, there's so many things available. And if everything worked exactly the way that a manufacturer tells you it's going to, you can build 1,000 horsepower easy. But in my world, it doesn't always work that way. So there's many things available, but you've got to put that right package together to deliver the numbers that you want.
Now, it seems like one of the first critical steps would be selecting an engine block. And there's a lot out there, Dwayne. Are there some that are better than others, or some that you prefer to work with?
Yes, I mean, if we're going to build some kind of street project, the old 010 blocks, and the old 400 blocks, they're history. They're too ancient. My go-to block for the basic street performance engine is a Dart SHP block. You cannot beat that block for the money you invest and the durability and the strength that it has. It's a very reasonable price block, and you've got to start out with a good solid base. And that's an excellent block to start with.
Now, we talked earlier about that expectation of horsepower, what a lot of customers are looking for when they come in. And for the customers where, let's say, money's no object, what numbers of horsepower are they looking for?
Well, we had a project that we did last fall, very similar to this, a really nice retro mod type Corvette. Money was really no object, but there's always parameters, no matter what, when someone says money's no object. So the difficult piece here was the fitting it underneath the hood of a Corvette without modification. So, and he wanted 1,000 horsepower. We can deliver 1,000 horsepower to the crank, in limited space. And that seems to be the number, and that 900 to 1,000 horse, that seems to be where people want to be if they have substantial money to make that happen. I guess it's good for the mail you go,
Now, Dwayne, do you prefer to use any kind of power adders in the form of, let's say, turbocharging or supercharging, or do you prefer to go more of that naturally aspirated route?
Well, I guess you'd say I'm old school. I love naturally aspirated, but and now fuel injection, of course, is a very big thing. So we're doing a lot of that, which gives it instant horsepower. And we do turbos and blowers. I mean, yes, we do that. The 4.6 Ford, that's a popular one that they put turbos on for street stuff. We do quite a bit of the 4.6 Fords for that. But at heart, I love naturally aspirated. And like I say, we've been able to deliver 1,450 horsepower naturally aspirated before. So.
Now, with these big engine builds, what's the usual turnaround time to get them done?
Well, I mean, any kind of project like this takes time. And basically, it takes a minimum of 6 weeks. I mean, I have 6 to 8 employees, depending on what's going on. So we do a lot of work, and we try to be fast and efficient. The oval track racing world has taught us to be fast and efficient because they can't wait. So I feel like we have pretty good delivery time on our street performance type stuff, but it's going to be a minimum 6 weeks just chasing parts and all that kind of stuff. And I've got some projects that have gone up to a year, especially some of the restoration type projects. It's extremely difficult to get components.
Now, I know something that was popular a couple years ago was running nitrous oxide, even on the street cars. Has that fallen out of favor, or is that still something that a lot of customers are looking for?
Well, it's still popular. It's more popular with the drag race people. People are preferring turbos and superchargers for the street. It's a little more dependable for the street, less maintenance. You don't have to fill bottles and things. So nitrous oxide is not quite as popular as it was. Now that they've refined turbos and can give you a smooth power band.
Now, you mentioned earlier, Dwayne, that some factors to consider when putting together a high-performance engine would be budget, and then also you talked a little bit about thinking through the use of the vehicle. What about some other questions that are really good to consider?
Well, another very important question. I mean, if you're going to do something like this, what look do you want? I mean, there's a million different ways we can externally make your engine look, and I want to make sure that package, when you open that hood, it's what you want and what looks good with the car. I say race car, we do so many of them, but any kind of automobile, I want to make sure that package, bam, it hits you when you open that hood. So I work a lot with the customer to get that look that he wants. That's important.
To that end, are you finding that a lot of customers are seeking more of a nostalgic look from an appearance standpoint, but yet they want more of that modern upgrade underneath?
That is becoming very popular. We're working on a Pontiac 428 right this moment. We're putting Edelbrock heads on it and all kinds of other stroker, everything else. But we machine the heads. We're painting the heads. When you open that hood, he wants it to look like that stock Pontiac from yesteryear, but delivering big numbers. But yes, that's becoming popular, and we can do it. It just takes a lot of extra work to camouflage the aftermarket components to a certain degree.
Along those lines, it seems like one of the emerging technologies that's becoming more and more popular is 3D printing. Is that something that's made its way into your shop?
Really, it hasn't, but it is becoming very popular. But it's not something that we have really got into yet.
Now, something else that's been out there for a lot longer is carbon fiber, and I know that continues to grow in popularity. And are you seeing that even from an engine building standpoint?
Oh yeah, that's becoming more popular. And once again, that's budget oriented. Depending on what the person wants. Carbon fiber intake manifolds, valve covers, just all kinds of little components. And then too, that goes along with the look that you want of your engine.
Now, Dwayne, something we haven't talked about yet are transmissions. So is there a certain brand or style that you like or prefer for these types of builds?
Well, I don't steer them too much on that because a lot depends on the automobile. What's going to go in it. All the new late model stuff, they've got excellent stuff. But if you've got an earlier model type vehicle, a lot of people will like the Power Glide. That you can make a Power Glide go in just about anything. It's a very dependable, economical transmission that a lot of aftermarket people are making. But automatics are definitely the way the majority of people are going, and I usually steer them that direction.
Now, changing topics a little bit, Dwayne, it's clear you're a diehard enthusiast. I mean, you're building high performance stuff all the time. I've got to imagine that what you're driving has some power behind it. Can you give us an idea what types of stuff is in your garage?
Well, that's interesting because you would think I have all kinds of things, but I'm a workaholic. I work 14-hour days, and I have a 2013 California Special Mustang. And the warranty just ran out, so the boys are planning some major overhauls on that Mustang that we're working on. And different of my employees, they have different play toys. 69 Mustang that we put a LS in. Another customer, one of my guys has an old dually pickup. We're getting ready to put an LS in. So we're playing around a lot, but to be honest with you, most of my play toys are my customers' toys because I'm just a workaholic, and I don't take the time to do my own stuff very often.
All right, final question for today, Dwayne, and it is this. What is the ultimate engine? Any make, any model, any year, in your opinion, what's the greatest?
Well, I'm a Ford man at heart. I hope no one gets upset about that. But I love the little 347 Ford Stroker. I mean, I have made some fabulous horsepower with those little things, and they just run and run and run. And I don't know. I've just been a Ford man. I just fell in love with those little things, and we built, you name it, we built versions of it. You can put so many different heads on those things and everything else, and that's always been my little sweetheart.
All right, Dwayne, and if people want to find out more about McGunigle engine performance, what are some ways that they can stay up to date?
You can go to our website, which is McGunegill'sengines.com, and give us a call anytime, 765-282-1913.
Well, Dwayne, this has been fun. I've really enjoyed it, man. You've got a lot of good insight, decades of experience, lots of good tips and tricks for people to think about when they're putting together these high-performance builds. This has been awesome, and we'll have to do it again real soon.
Very good. Thank you.
Don't adjust that dial. On the Move, we'll be right back. Our program is proudly presented by Mecum Auctions, the world's largest collector car auctions. Now back to Matt and John.
Hey, we are so glad to have a very good friend and occasional guest of the show. Stephen Cox, my compadre from the Mecum Auctions television shows on NBCSN, is with us to talk about something very close to his heart. I know for a long, long time, and we're going to learn more, Stephen has had a 1980 Fox body Mustang, and he has done some recent upgrades to that as well, tying in with what a lot of people do over a long period of time, and that's converting a run-of-the-mill, ordinary, relatively low-performance car to something that would be well represented in the modern era. So with that, Stephen, thanks so much for joining Matt and I today, and take us right back to day one on the acquisition of your 1980 Ford Mustang.
Oh, this goes way, way back, guys. Back in, the spring of 1982. I was thinking about graduating from high school, and in the coming years, I was going to go to college. I needed a better car, and I had already had a Ford Torino, which I loved, but I needed a long distance car, wanted something a little newer, so I traded it in to upgrade to a Mustang 2, and then I realized it wasn't much of an upgrade. So I moved on from the Mustang 2 to the Fox body, and I bought this in April of 1982. And so over a period of time, it occurred to me, and nobody knew this at the time. Nobody knew that it was going to be the least valuable Mustang ever built because the 82 Bosses Back campaign hadn't come along yet. The late 80s transferring into the SN95s. None of this had occurred. So the jury was still out. I didn't think it was going to be a valuable car, but I didn't know. I mean, it's not even a first year. I can't even say it's a 79. This has got to be the least valuable Mustang ever built. But I dated my wife in that car. Graduated from high school in that car, drove that car to college, drove that car to play basketball for years, and it's a member of the family now. And so I thought, I either need to make this the car that I wanted Ford to build all along, or I need to get rid of it. But just letting it linger in between is not really acceptable because the car's a member of the family now. I've had it since 1982.
Well, so fill us in on what exactly is the spec of the car, body style, colors, and what was the original powertrain?
The original powertrain was the venerable 2.3-liter straight four-cylinder with a smoking 88 horsepower of fury under the hood. And it was just as bad. In fact, after I drove that for 100,000, 120,000 miles, it didn't even have the 88 horsepower left. And it came in what Ford cleverly called medium blue, and it is the sedan version, which now today we know is the notchback. And really, that's the only valuable thing about the car. The early Foxes, everybody wants now. The four-eyed Foxes, so your pre-85, 86 era, and they want the notchbacks. And that's the only thing the car has going for it. And now it is wearing PPG Industries mica blue paint, which has a little touch of purple behind it and a great deal of metallic. And the changes in the car are many and varied, but just to hit the highlights, it has a Tremec T5 5-speed manual transmission. We put the Steeda tri-axe shifter on it, and oh man, it just feels magical. We put a 9-inch Ford rear end into it as well, with a 373 gear installed that it really just jumps up and goes quick. In fact, it almost overruns first gear. I may end up lowering that just a little bit. The front and rear suspension, no major changes yet. That's on the list of things to do. The brakes, we made a huge change. The guys at Late Model Restoration helped me out with their SN95 Cobra Mustang kit. And what that is, it's a complete four-wheel disc conversion, which includes the 5-lug conversion, which of course had to be done for a 1980 car as well. Then the steering, I went with a Duralast steering rack for a 1983 Mustang GT. Now, that did give me 2.5 turns lock-to-lock and a better ratio, but it still doesn't have the feel that I'm looking for. So we put a lot of money and effort into it, but that's kind of an R&D thing that's still going on. The wheels are just magical. They're, again, from Late Model Restoration. They're 17-inch chrome pony wheels, which just look fantastic on the car, and they are shod with Continental Extreme Contact Sport radials, which I have a great deal of racing experience with in amateur series where they mandate a DOT tire. So I thought, hey, we'll go on that. And the engine is a Ford Windsor 347 small block. It's called the 425 LM from McGunegill's Engine Performance in Muncie, Indiana, and puts out 407 brake horsepower at the wheels. So it's got, a Ford Racing aluminum cylinder head set on it. It's got a slightly milder cam. It went with a 512 lift hydraulic roller to just give it a nice, smooth feel when you're stopped at stop signs and stoplights. Edelbrock aluminum intake. It's just a barrel of fun.
Now, Stephen, this is obviously where the process has led to, but take us back. You mentioned something really important. You said that basically you kind of came to that crossroads where you realized the vehicle was significant to you and your family, and you wanted to make it the Mustang that it could have been or Ford should have made. So what were some of the steps that you took to kind of, how was it limited by budget? Was it limited by a specific performance goal? How did you go about arriving to where the vehicle is today?
Well, it's definitely limited by budget because, what I would like to do is put it on an 18-wheeler and haul it out to Shelby American in Las Vegas and leave it with them for 3 months and then come back and have, a whole new experience. But by that time, you bought 5 new cars. So what I wanted to do was, first of all, I wanted to decide what I want this car to be. Now, if you guys remember the early Fox days, they were alternate drag racers because they were extremely good at it, and they couldn't beat a equal Camaro in the same era on a road course, and they didn't have the brakes to. So I decided that my favorite form of motorsport and what I want to feel and the atmosphere that I want to feel like I'm inside, the universe I want to create, is a road racing car. And so that was the very first conclusion that I came to. And of course, that was probably the most difficult possible choice for this vehicle because, like I said, they made fantastic drag racing cars and they converted very easily and very commonly, but very few people were trying to do what I'm trying to do with my Fox. And so that's the first conclusion I came to. I want a car that sits low. I want wide rubber on all 4 corners, not just the back. I want an upgraded suspension, not just tons of horsepower under the hood. I really want the car to handle well. And that means like subframe connectors. They just, by the way, guys, just last week my subframes came in, and I got the full length ones to really tie up the flex in the body. And we're having a little bit of trouble finding a, what do you call it? It goes under the hood. Hang on a second. It'll come to me. A strut tower brace, because clearance is an issue. I mean, the 1980s had a really low hood on them. So we're looking for a strut tower brace that will fit. And we've already found a rear tower brace that'll go into the trunk lid just to make the car really rigid and really take a corner well.
Stephen, let's talk a bit about your choice of the power plant, really the heart and soul of any project like this. We had a great conversation with Dwayne McGunegill, your engine builder, by the way, and one of his favorite engines of all time. He told us, without any prompting, that the 347 Stroker was one of his favorites. Now, I can understand increasing your horsepower by a component of about 4 or 5 times the original power of that 2.3-liter 4-cylinder. It definitely was the way to go. But fill us in on the conversation and the counsel, the advice that Dwayne had given you as you guys first started talking about what might be the ultimate, we'll call it small block for your high-performance street Mustang.
Well, Dwayne is fantastic. All the guys at McGunegill know their stuff. And besides, I kind of cheated a little bit. They had supplied the engines for my stock car race, for the stock car racing teams that I drove for from like 2012 through 2017 or 18. So I had a bit of a history with them, and I knew their qualifications. And so I just went to Dwayne and said, would you consider this project? And he said, yeah, sure, come on out. So I drove out to Muncie from the Indianapolis area and sat down with him. And what really impressed me was the fact that before we started talking horsepower numbers, he asked me the same question that Matt asked just a couple of minutes ago. What is your vision for this car? He always says, don't start with the engine, start with your vision for the car. What do you want this to be? And he sat down with pencil and paper, and he was writing on the back of an envelope, and he just took down everything that I said that Matt and I were talking about, that, I wanted to feel like a road racer. I wanted to have that captivating atmosphere that can take a corner and be really fast and have that attitude. And that's what I want to feel like when I'm sitting inside the car. So he takes all this down, and he taps his pencil on his desk, and he says, so what do you need? Maybe 600 or 700 horsepower? And I laughed and I said, Dwayne, once I hit Mach 6, what am I going to do with the other 200 horsepower? And, this is a 2,500-pound car. I don't know if you guys realize that, but actually you can go to MustangAttitude.com, look up all the data on this. The notchbacks, they weighed exactly 2,508 pounds. I mean, that's nothing for a car today. And so I didn't feel like I needed necessarily, full thrust rocket in it. So I told him, look, I want the first number to be a 4. After that, I don't care. And so they got the 425 late model engine from Ford. And I told them, make sure you stay with a Windsor block, because something that's very important to me, this is a huge deal to me. I want the thing to remain a Mustang. I don't want to end up with a car that's not a Mustang anymore. And so if we mix and match some parts, I'm okay with that. But the wheels, I want pony chrome wheels. Now, are they true to 1980 era? No, but they're Mustang through and through, and everybody knows it. I didn't want to go with, a new electronic kit or EFI or anything like that. I wanted to stay with carburation, and I also wanted to stay with a Windsor block. Why? Because that is as Mustang as anything can ever possibly be. And he said, well, we're going to need to pump it out to 347 to get you above 400 horsepower. And I said, that's fine. It's still a Windsor block. It's still, everything in this car and on this car is still true blue Mustang.
Now, Stephen, looking ahead, what are your future plans for the car? Now, you mentioned short of putting the vehicle on an 18-wheeler and shipping it out to Shelby, short of that, what are some other, let's say, more realistic goals or expectations you have here in the short term? What else do you want to do to this car to make it the ultimate Mustang?
Well, the plans are already on the books right now with the engine, the full drivetrain done, the transmission done, the rear end done, the wheel and tire package, and the brake upgrade. Everything there is done. So what we're looking at now is an insanely fast car that has mediocre handling. It's not terrible, but I want it to be a lot better. So we're doing two specific projects right now. First of all, we're tightening the chassis. That's where the subframe connectors come in, and the clearance under the hood for the strut tower brace and so forth. That the parts are already here. In fact, they're going on. I may drive it over tomorrow because it's going to be really nice weather here in central Indiana tomorrow. So that is in the process right now. Once we get the chassis really tight and really firm and really rigid, then it will actually matter once we do the full suspension. So that means replacing all the shocks and all the springs, and maybe even going with new lower A-frames and things like that to really give it a good handling package. And then we have to revisit the steering because we put on the Duralast steering rack, which exactly matches an 83 Mustang GT, and it just doesn't have the feel that I want. So we have to revisit that. And then once that's done, we're down to cosmetics. We want to do the interior and then repaint. But the paint on it's pretty good. It's not terrible. It's actually pretty good looking car. So that's the dead last thing that I want to do. That and the interior. So that's the plan.
Final question, man. I just have to hear observations of time that you've had so far behind the wheel, power characteristics of that 347 stroker power plant. What are some of your observations as far as smoothness, forecast the reliability of that engine, and most importantly, how do you feel when you punch that throttle?
Well, the feeling is your heart just soars because we have 407 brake horsepower. That's 407 at the rear wheels at 5,600 RPMs. Now, we have Flowtech Raptor mufflers on like a custom dual crossover system that I had made. And so when you hit 5,600 RPMs, you're waking up the neighbors and you know what's going on. I mean, it's talking back to you pretty loud. But here's the amazing thing. You've got 435 pound-feet of torque at just 4,500 RPMs. Again, that's directly off the dyno just last year. And so this is really recent, upgraded, and accurate information. And when you listen to the engine, it has not a Ferrari snarl, but a muscle car rumble. It's got that ground-shaking rumble to it. And you don't have to hit 60, when I think the Redline's at 68, 6,900 RPM. You don't have to get anywhere near it to feel maximum torque. At 4,500 pounds of 435 pound-feet of torque at only 4,500 revs, it pushes you back in the seat, not just in first and second gear, but in third and fourth gear, all the way up until you get to the overdrive in fifth. That third and fourth gear, you can just press it and you can feel that surge that just pushes you back in the seat. And that's what you pay for. That's really what you want. The longevity of the engine is something I'm really comfortable with because the 347 equation has been around for a long time. And Dwayne McGunegill is a bit of a Ford guy. He loves Fords. He's been developing these for a very long time. And he is all about reliable horsepower, and that's one of the very first things he told me. He said, look, we can give you a big number, and we can put something on the dyno that's going to blow your mind. But he said, you want reliable horsepower. You want to be able to turn the key on pump gas and have a streetable engine that gives you a great, rewarding experience, and will do it for 50,000 and 80,000 and 100,000 miles. And so far, I think that's what I got. It's just a barrel of fun. It never gets old when you hit the gas and it just presses you back in the seat and you listen to the song of the engine.
Well said. How you feel when you're behind the wheel. Boy, that's what it's all about. Stephen, thank you so much for bringing us up to date on your fantastic Mustang project. And we will see you coming up here in Glendale, Arizona.
Looking forward to it, guys.
You've been listening to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. For more information, visit Mecum.com. And join us again next time as we take you inside the world of muscle and collector cars and more.